The Trump administration and the president continue to shine light on anti-government protests inside Iran. Iran's foreign minister is warning neighboring countries against supporting those protests that have rocked the Islamic Republic over the past 2 weeks. Let's talk about the current situation and what could be next. Norman Rule is the former Iran mission manager for the Director of National Intelligence, who before that spent more than 30 years at the CIA working on Middle East issues. And Kareem Sajapur is an Iranian-American policy analyst at the Carnegie Endowment. Thanks for being here, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Norm, let me ask you first. Where are we now? We can't get a real great sense of where these protests are on the ground.
Well, social media has certainly been constrained by Iran's choking off of the internet. However, it's probable that these unrest continues, and arrests are continuing right now as the Iranians pick up the protesters, the instigators, and the people who organize the protest. Iran is also gradually starting to open up the internet, but they'll be careful to do so, fearing that doing so would allow unrest to increase.
Kareem, the administration, the Iranian administration, the foreign ministry saying if the Iran deal is scrapped, quote, appropriate and heavy response by the Iranians to the U.S., and that the U.S. administration will definitely regret it. That's coming out today. They're already charging that the U.S. is essentially behind these protests on the ground.
Whenever there are popular protests in Iran, the Iranian government always blames it on outside powers, whether it's the United States, Israel, or more recently, Saudi Arabia. The reality is that Iran is a young population, a population of 80 million people, and there's tremendous economic discontent, but also social and political discontent. But I think the fact remains that this is a regime which has 4 decades of brutality, and they are committed to staying in power. They don't have a lot of popular support, but they're quite united. The security forces are quite united. And I'd say society, in contrast, they're deeply discontent, but they're somewhat divided about what they want. And I think bottom line is that, I say in 1979, Iranians experienced a revolution without democracy, and today they seek democracy without a revolution.
Norm, it's not like we saw in 2009, at least not yet, as far as the protests on the streets. But is the sense that the regime has lost some cred with its own people?
Absolutely. And in fact, what's important is the protesters represent the basic constituency of the Supreme Leader, of Rouhani, of Ahmadinejad, and in some cases of the Green Path movement. The protesters didn't have an actual leader. And one must wonder, if there were an actual leader, what would have happened to these protests? Would they have grown significantly? The numbers were certainly smaller than 2009, but they were spread over such a geography that this must have been a terrible problem for the regime to confront.
And it's different for this administration. This president speaking out, this administration speaking out, a good thing as far as you see?
I think it is a good thing. It's important that we don't ally ourselves directly with the demonstrators or any aspect of the movement. Iran would use that to crush them and to paint them with the U.S. hand. At the same time, we should stand up for the right of protesters to peacefully express their political feelings and stand up also against oppressive regimes who put these people in jail. And it's important that we stand up now for the many Iranians who are imprisoned by the security forces.
You know, you recently, Kareem, wrote about Iran's cyber capabilities. Not only are they funding terrorists throughout the region, but they're also doing some pretty aggressive things online.
Yeah, one of the findings of our cyber report was that Iran isn't a first-tier cyber power. It's not like the United States or Russia or China. We call it a third-tier cyber power. But they've been very effective at preying on fifth-tier cyber powers. So countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, countries which don't really have an advanced cyber program or weren't paying attention, or even financial institutions. You know, Iran managed to hack, I think JP Morgan embezzled some money. So that's one of the things that Iran does well. And
they can black out inside their own country.
Yes, and I think this is a very key aspect of the protests. They can throttle the internet when they want to inhibit communications, when they want to inhibit information. And I think that for the United States, that's what's key, is you want to do everything in your power to prevent Iran's ability to have a communications and information blackout.
For the rest of the global community, and you see Europe, Norm, kind of taking a hands-off approach, saying let's wait and see how this comes out. One German leader said, we don't know who the white hats are here. What do you say to that?
Well, look, clearly the protesters are in the right. Clearly the protesters have valid valid grievances, and clearly this is a repressive government. And it's important for the world to stand up, the United States and its partners, with these people who are fighting for their freedom. At the same time, it's important that as we approach this problem in the days after, that we have a common approach with our European partners and our regional allies. We should be doing everything we can to push information technology into Iran so that Iran is unable to crack down on the internet in the inevitable future protests.
But Norm, what do you think heavy and appropriate response to getting out of the Iran deal means for the Iranians?
It's rhetoric. The Iranians must have investments to sustain the foundations of the regime. An absence of foreign investment means a weakening of the Iranian regime itself. The JCPOA is in Iran's interest. Now, to be clear, the JCPOA also provides us with unprecedented insight into the program because of the IAEA and allows us to freeze the program for a period of time.
Okay. Kareem, Norm, I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Bob.